Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we wrapped up our saving and loading section, and we focused on adding a new in-game menu to allow us to save our data to our browser local storage, and then that way we continue our game from where we left off. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There will also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. Alright, so now that we wrapped up our saving and loading section, we're now going to switch gears to our Monster Party and our Monster Details scene section. And in this section, we're going to focus on creating some new Phaser 3 scenes. And in these scenes, this is what we'll have in the ability to view all of the monsters that are currently in our player's party, and we'll be able to go ahead and select those monsters to view additional details. And so typically this would display things like the monster's name, their ID, maybe a quick summary of some details about that monster, where they can be found, and we'll be able to view all their attacks. Then later on, we'll be able to connect this to our inventory scene where we'll be able to use items and then pick a monster from our party and apply that item to them. Likewise, we'll be able to connect this to our battle scene so we can actually view the monsters in our party. Alright, to see a quick example of what we'll be building in this section is we're going to go ahead and add a new item to our menu in our world scene, and this will be monsters. And so when we select this menu option, what's going to happen is we're going to start a new Phaser scene. And in this scene, we'll show our monsters that are currently in our player's party, along with their level and their health. And what we can do is we can either go back to our main menu, or we can select one of our monsters. And when we do that, we'll be taken to another new scene where we have our monster details. And so here, this is where we're going to display metadata about our monster. We can show their experience points, how much more they need to level up, what their current attacks are, and we could go through them to see what they do, and much more. And so we'll be building out our placeholder to have this scene in place, and then later on we can come back and add more functionality to it. Alright, so to go ahead and get started, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new Phaser 3 scene. So what we'll do is we'll come into our source code. Let's go ahead and go into our scenes folder. We'll add a new scene, and we're going to call this Monster Party Scene.js. Then what we'll do is let's go ahead and open up our options scene, and we're just going to copy the top part of our file. So what we'll do is we'll copy our export, go ahead and paste that. Let's go ahead and come down to our constructor. We'll grab that. And then let's just go ahead and grab our Phaser import and our scene keys. And what we'll do is we'll rename our class. So we'll do Monster Party Scene. And then let's go ahead and jump over to our scene keys file. So let's go ahead and add in Monster Party Scene, and we'll copy that key for our value. Now if we come back to our class, let's just go ahead and update that. And then let's go ahead and open up our main.js file so we can go ahead and add in our new scene. So we'll come down to our game configuration. Let's copy that line, we'll add it, and let's add in our Monster Party Scene, and we'll reference our new class. So real quick, let's jump over to our preload scene, and we're going to go ahead and start our new scene when our game starts. So we'll go ahead and start our Monster Party scene. So before we start adding more code to our Monster Party scene, what I want to go ahead and do is create a new class that all of our scenes will go ahead and extend. And the reason for that is a lot of our scenes have a lot of code in common that we could go ahead and place in this parent class and have these scene classes go ahead and inherit from it. As an example, if I come over to our preload scene, what we've gotten the pattern of doing is for each of our main methods, like our preload and our create methods, we have a console log statement. And so this has become common across all of our scenes. Another good example is in our battle scene and in our menu scene, in our world scene, we need some type of controls. And what we're doing is we're creating a new instance of controls in each of these classes, and then adding in logic to go ahead and handle the input from there and do something with it. And for our new Monster Party scene, we're going to need to do the same exact functionality. So we'll want the same pattern where we have our logging. We'll want the same pattern of where we use our controls class so we can navigate our menus there. And by taking all this logic and placing it into a base scene, then any new scenes that we create that inherit from that will already have that logic ready to go. And so this is a good time to go ahead and create that class before we create this new scene, so then that way we can test our functionality. So to go ahead and do this, if we come over to our scenes folder, let's make a new file, and we're going to call this base scene.js. And what we'll do is let's copy all of our logic from our Monster Party scene over to our base scene. And let's go ahead and update our class name. So we're going to call this base scene. All right, so for our base scene class, what we'll want to do is for all of our methods and for our constructor, we'll want to make sure we can take in whatever parameters we need so we can pass them to our base phaser scene class. Since what we're going to end up doing is in our individual scenes, we're going to go ahead and extend our base scene class instead of our phaser scene class. And so what we'll need to do as an example for our constructor here, when I call super, I'm passing in my phaser scene configuration. So I need to expect that as a parameter in our constructor here. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and do config here. And instead of calling the super with our key explicitly, we're just going to go ahead and pass in config so we pass it through. And then what we can do is now we'll go ahead and set up our various methods that we expect on most of our classes. And so we're going to have init, we'll have our create and our preload. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump over to my preload scene real quick. I'm going to go ahead and copy this here. We're going to go ahead and paste that after our init. And then what we'll do is we'll copy our console log. We're going to go ahead and place that inside our init. And then we're going to do the same thing for our create. And then real quick, we'll also go ahead and add in our update method. And for update, we're going to expect our time. However, for this one, we won't actually log any messages. Otherwise, it'll be firing every frame of our game. So then what we can do is if we want to reference the scene that we're currently in, we can go ahead and use this, our constructor, to reference our current class, and then we can grab the name from our constructor. Then that way, this will be dynamic based on whatever class we're currently referring to. So we'll go ahead and update those, and then let's go ahead and update our method name. So we'll change this to init, change this to preload, and we'll have create. All right, and then what we'll do is we'll come back to our monster party scene, and let's go ahead and save. And if we go ahead and test, what should happen is right away, when we come into our console, we should see our preload scene, we see our log lines, and then we see our log lines tied to our monster party scene. And so we can see right now, right away, that our functionality for extending our base scene is already working, and we're getting our logging functionality that we expect. Likewise, if we come to our preload scene, if we want to go ahead and change this class to extend our new class, so instead of doing phaser scene, let's go ahead and do our base scene. Then what we'll do is in our preload method, we're just going to go ahead and call super, and then we'll do preload to reference the preload method in our parent class. And then if we go ahead and get rid of this console log statement, we should be able to do this in each of our methods. So we have our preload, let's go ahead and do our create. Get rid of that. If we go ahead and save, what we should see is our logging functionality should still work as it was before. But now we do see our init method, even though we didn't have an init method on this class before. All right, so the next thing we'll do is in our base scene class, we'll go ahead and add in our controls, and we'll create an instance of it so that way we have it available in our scenes. So if we jump over to our options scene, so we'll come down above our constructor, and let's go ahead and copy our logic for our controls. And so we'll go ahead and have our property. We'll add that to our new scene. But instead of making this private, we're going to add an underscore. And the reason we're doing that is if this was private, it would only be available to this instance of our class. But we actually want this to be available to all of our child instances. And so for like our monster party scene, our option scene, we want to be able to go ahead and grab a reference to our controls. And so we don't want this to be private. And then so what we'll do is down our create method, we'll go ahead and create an instance of our controls. We'll do this. Our controls will equal to new controls, and we'll pass in our current scene for our reference. So then what we should be able to do is if we come to our, let's go ahead into our title scene. So if we go ahead and open up our title scene, what we'll do is let's go ahead and extend and use our new class. So instead of phaser scene, let's use our base scene. And then what we'll do is back in our preload scene, instead of jumping into our monster party scene, let's go ahead and jump into our title scene. And so because we're extending our base scene, let's go ahead and come into our methods, and let's go ahead and call the super method. So we'll do super, we'll call init. Let's get rid of our console log. And then we'll come down to create, we'll do the same thing. And then let's come down to update. We'll do the same thing there. And now if we go ahead and save, we should see our 3 log statements are still being shown for our title scene. So the next thing we need to do is on our class, we need to go ahead and get rid of our private instance of controls. So if we come up to the top of our class, let's go ahead and remove that property from our class. And then we'll come down to our create method. We'll remove where we create our instance. And then what we want to do is in our update method and anywhere else, we're referencing it. Instead of referencing our private version, we'll reference our protected version. We'll go ahead and save. And now what we should be able to do is in our scene, we should be able to go ahead and come over and still process our input. And so what I should be able to do is go ahead and go to my options scene and go ahead and do new game. All right, so now that we updated our title scene, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and update all of our other scenes to go ahead and extend our base scene. So we'll go ahead and jump over to our battle scene. Let's go ahead and start by extending our class. So we're going to extend our base scene. Let's get rid of our controls. We'll come down to our init method and let's do super and we'll do init. We're going to go ahead and copy that, come down to our create method. We'll paste it, get rid of our console log, update to be create. Let's come down to the bottom of our create. We're going to go ahead and get rid of our controls instance. So we'll reference our protected one and we'll still lock our input. We'll come down to our update. Let's go ahead and do super. We'll do update. And now we'll go ahead and find references to our controls. And let's go ahead and update those. Then we'll go to our options scene. Let's go ahead and get rid of our controls since we're right there. We'll come up to the top of our class. Let's extend our base scene. We'll come down to our init method. We'll go ahead and do super init. Let's copy that. Get rid of our console log. Come down to our create. We'll update our call. Let's get rid of our controls where we create it. And let's go ahead and do a find and replace to update all of our controls down in our update. And we'll go ahead and do our super and we'll call update. All right, so then next we're going to go ahead and have our world scene. So we'll get rid of where we create our controls instance. Let's come up to the top of our class. We'll get rid of our controls. Let's extend our base scene. And if we come back down to our init method, let's do super.init, clean up our console log, copy, do the same thing, create. Let's come down to our update method, and we'll change this to update. And let's do a find and replace to update our controls. And let's go ahead and save. So now what we should be able to do is we should be able to test all of our various scenes. So if we come back to our game, let's just make sure everything's working properly. So we're on our title scene and we see our preload and our create, our console logs have fired. In our title scene, we can still use our controls to go ahead and navigate. On our options scene, we can see our log messages and our input is still working properly. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to change the color. We'll hit close. Let's come back into options. All right, our settings are still saving. Now if we go ahead and go to new game, we should be able to move around our scene. We can open up our menu, save our game. Perfect. All right, and so we just need to test our battle scene real quick. So if we come up to our grass area, we'll try to get to a fight. And what we should see is right away, our scene starts like it used to, and our input is still working, and we can select our various options. And we go ahead and have our battle. Perfect. All right, so now we've verified our refactor is working. Let's go ahead and come back to our base scene. So one last thing we're going to do in our base scene class is we want to treat this class as an abstract class. And an abstract class is basically a restricted class that is not meant to be used to create objects. And we shouldn't create instances of it directly. And so to access an instance, you actually need to inherit from a child class and create an instance of that. So in our example, we wouldn't be able to create a base scene directly. Instead, we would have to create like our preload scene and create an instance of that in our game. And so in JavaScript, there's not a way to create an abstract class directly versus like in other programming languages or even in TypeScript, you can use the abstract keyword. And then that way, when your code compiles, you can actually create an instance of it. You'll have an error. But in JavaScript, what we can do is we can check our class name when we create an instance of it. And if we recognize that it's our base scene is the class name that's being created, we can throw an error. And so to go ahead and do this, what we'll do is in our constructor, we're just going to go ahead and add some logic to go ahead and check what the name of our constructor is. So up in our constructor, after we do our super call, we're just going to do a check and we'll say if this constructor is equal to our base scene. So if it's our base scene class, we're just going to go ahead and throw an error. And so we'll do throw new error, and we're just going to write out base scene is an abstract class and cannot be instantiated directly. And so what's nice about this is as soon as we save our game, we should see our title scene still and our preload scene was created. And so the only time we'll get this error is if we try to create a new base scene class right away. So as an example, in our base scene, if I just do const b equals a new base scene, and we go ahead and save, we should see right away we now have this error that wasn't caught, and it has our message. So like I said, this is just a way to get abstract classes with JavaScript, and that way we can enforce that we're not using this class directly. And all we'll be using it for is putting in our common code for our other scenes. So one last thing we're going to do in our base scene class is we're going to add some custom styling to our log messages. And so what you can do with your browser log messages is you can add some basic CSS styling to apply formatting to them and color. And so a really great example of this is the phaser banner. And so in the banner here, we can see there's a few things going on. We have some minor colors being logged. We can see our log message here has a black background. We have the color white applied to our text. Versus ours is just the normal console log styling that gets applied. And so by applying this custom styling, what we can do is we can enhance our log so we can quickly see where our log line is tied to. So currently we have information like our class and what method, but if we wanted a quick way to like narrow down to a particular set, we could use a color as an example. And so applying this styling to your log messages is actually really easy. All we need to do is just add a little of a prefix to our message and then add a second argument that has the styling we want to apply. And so go ahead and do this. What we'll do is we're going to make a new protected method. We're going to call this log. And for our log, we'll have one parameter, it'll be called message. And so for our parameter message, this is just going to be our log line that we want to go ahead and log to our console. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy this line of code here. Let's go ahead and paste it. We're going to go ahead and change this to go ahead and be our message argument that's passed in. And then what you want to do is to apply styling, you need to go ahead and use %c to go ahead and apply your custom CSS. And then you provide a second argument, and this is just going to be a CSS string of styling that you want to apply. So as an example, if I want to apply a color, I just provide my CSS color, and I'm going to go ahead and use orange. And then you can also do things like if I want to add a background. And so I'll do a background color, and we'll go ahead and do black. And then what we need to do is we just need to call this method. So instead of calling console.log, we're just going to do this, and then our private method. So we're just going to copy this, and we'll replace that in our various methods. And if we go ahead and save, what we should see right away now when our scenes log messages, we can see our styling is being applied. And so we can quickly see that if we have a black background with orange text, this log line is tied to our scenes, our base scene anyway. And then later on, what we could do is, like when I add code to our monster party scene, if there's a particular message we want to see, we can apply a different color, and then it's very evident that that's what's being logged. All right, so now that we have our base scene in place, what we can do is later on in our monster party scene, we'll be able to go ahead and use our controls, and we won't have to keep reapplying that same logic that we've done in our other scenes in the past. And so with our base scene wrapped up, that actually brings an end to this video. All right, so in our next video, we're going to go ahead and start building on our monster party scene. And so we'll start building out the overall look and feel of our scene, and we'll start adding in our game objects. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.